How did God create us and everything around us without changing? In other words, Kabbalah tells us that God did not change from before he created the universe and everything within it to after he created the universe. In other words, he was always there in his true infinity and purity. So how is it possible that he didn't change while he created the universe? Anybody who does something changes while he does something. He gets invested and goes ahead and does that. But God didn't change. How? Well, I know many of you might be thinking right now, well, what do you mean? Can't God do anything? He can just go poof, and then it just happens, right? Well, yes, but there's another cool and interesting Kabbalistic fact, and that is that everything that exists within God. In other words, we right now exist inside of God. So how is it possible for us to exist inside of God? In other words, we are part of him now, but before he existed us and after he existed us or created us, sorry for using the wrong word, is the same. Before we weren't there and now we are there and within him. So how is it possible that he didn't change? Now, why can't anything exist outside of him? Why is it that we need to exist within him? Because if God is the true infinity, that means he is the only real thing that exists, and that means nothing can exist outside of him. Everything must exist within him. But again, we're back to that question. Then how is it possible that he didn't change? Well, what is the issue if God changed? What's the problem? Why can't God change? Well, the issue with that is, if God is the ultimate truth and the only real thing which exists, that means if he changed before there was something else, and the change came for what reason? Was he not perfect before we existed and now he is perfect, or now is he imperfect? How can God go from a state of being perfect to imperfect, or imperfect to perfect? God must be perfect at all times. That's why he exists and must exist always and everywhere. To understand all of this, we're going to have to take a deep look into the Kabbalistic teaching of God's energy, which is called in Kabbalistic scriptures light. The original term in the Kabbalistic language is called or, but it means light. There are many different ways we can get something done in this world. Let's say if we want to get some water from the tap into our mouths. So what we'll need to do is we'll have to take the water physically and bring it from there to here. And in order for the water to get to us, it needs to leave its original place and come to us. Or let's say energy. If we want to build a house, we need to take energy from our hands and take some existing material and put them together. In other words, our energy needs to engage the physical matter which we're dealing with and affect it. The reason Kabbalists like the term light, or, is because light is actually something very interesting. The source of the light stays in its place, and the light just gets to its destination and does its thing without the source of the light, let's say the sun, getting invested or getting involved. It's just doing its own thing, and then we got to deal with it however we deal with it. Now, we do need to remember that this term light, which Kabbalists use, is only metaphorical, and it's obvious that the godly energy is not exactly the same thing as light coming from the sun, because the sun itself is a creation of God, but it's good to use as an analogy sometimes. To better understand this concept of light described in Kabbalah, let's use an analogy from a professor teaching a very deep concept in philosophy. So when this professor is teaching a class, he needs to prepare, get involved, engage his students, look at them, speak to them, give it over to them in an organized way, and that's how they will understand this concept and receive it within them. This process takes time of the professor and investment and involvement. Now let's compare this scenario to the professor sitting in his office by himself in his own room and just thinking about this idea which he's trying to develop. Okay, so just imagine that scenario, and now imagine us peeking into his window and looking at him. So he might be sitting there with a very serious face, trying to figure out his idea and thinking, so when we look at him, we can understand that this person is involved in something deep, something mindful, something to understand. But we don't know what is going on in that mind. We can only understand what was going on in that mind when that mind comes and shares this information with us and explains it to us. So the concept of light, or the way it's explained in Kabbalah, is this second idea, where the professor is kind of minding his own business and we're getting this energy from the person and we're understanding something's going on, but we're not getting a full image. So the same thing is with God's light. God is infinite. God is everything. But then there's this energy which is emanated automatically from his greatness and is not invested in anything. It's just shining and going out. Now, this energy is always connected and one with God. In other words, it never left God. It's very different from the case where the professor is explaining something to his students, where in that case, he's leaving himself and investing himself and putting himself into the minds of his students. But when we're looking at him, the expression is all within him. He's minding his own business. So the same thing, or not exactly the same thing, but metaphorically speaking, when God has this infinite light which is shining from him, he's not invested in us. He's just being himself. It is within this aura, within this light, with which God creates the entire universe in a way which he is not invested. In other words, it happens, so to speak, almost automatically. And this is why God does not change, and yet we still exist within God as some sort of emanation coming from him. But all this information is obviously being said very quickly, and this type of stuff is studied by people in Kabbalah school for years. So I hope you stay with us for another couple of videos to try to see if we can understand these concepts a little better and how Kabbalah explains the entire spiritual evolution of worlds and the cosmos which happens above our understanding. Thank you for watching.